The New York Rangers forget to play defense, and they give us the most Rangers sequence of all time during a crushing 7-3 loss to the Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blueshirts fans, to episode number 1264 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Rangers close out just a wonderful weekend of hockey with an absolutely crushing, devastating 7-3 home loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets, a game that featured what I thought was honestly the most Rangers sequence ever, or at least the most 2024-2025 Rangers sequence either. Going to elaborate on that a little bit and talk about exactly what that was and when that occurred in the game. Some of you might already kind of have an idea, but we'll get to that in due time. We're also going to talk about this abysmal defense that the Rangers played in this game. Obviously, Jonathan Quick didn't have his best game either, but the Ranger defensemen I thought were absolutely atrocious in this one. And we'll get to that in just a minute here too. But right at the top of the show here, something that I have to get off my chest, something that hit me like a ton of bricks when I was preparing for this episode and getting ready to record a little bit earlier today. You look at what happened this weekend, and you look at the devastating overtime loss to the Senators, and you look at this devastating 4-goal loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And how did this happen, and how did we even get here? Here's how. How we did not get here is not a talent discrepancy between the Rangers and either of their two opponents over the weekend. I truly believe that. Some of you might fight me on this. To me, I don't believe that either the Senators or the Blue Jackets have an overall better team, at least on paper, than the Rangers do. I think on paper, the Rangers are superior to both those teams. But what hit me like a ton of bricks, what I talked about a second ago there, is this thought that I had, this realization that I came to. It's pretty much undeniable. Neither of those teams might be as talented as the Rangers are, but both of those teams wanted these games far more than the Rangers did. And you might hear that and look at the Senators game if you're an eternal optimist and say, well, you know, the Rangers, they were up by 2 goals 2 different times in that game. They led the entire way. They lost in overtime. That's all true. But the Rangers were only winning that game for one reason, basically, and that was Igor Shesterkin, and then they lose in overtime. You look at that game from start to finish, which team was out there grinding more, which team was battling more, which team was playing with more urgency. It was the Ottawa Senators. And on top of that, you know, the Rangers had the lead in that game, and then the Senators came back from 2 goals down with 10 minutes to go. Do you really think if the Rangers were in the same situation that the Senators were in that game, down by 2 goals with less than 10 minutes to go, that they're going to come back and score 2 goals in the final 10 minutes, force the game into overtime, and then win it? I mean, there's been no evidence this season that the Rangers would do anything like that. Now, last season, yeah, I could absolutely believe that. I would almost be expecting that if this was last season, but that just further illustrates the complete and total 180 that this team has done from last season to this season. The Senators wanted that game more, and very clearly, the Blue Jackets wanted the game more on Sunday, the game that we're going to be talking about here today. It was evidenced by that sequence that I alluded to a second ago, the most Rangers sequence either. And like I said, we're going to break down exactly what that sequence was a little bit later in the episode. But again, the name of the game for me, it's not that either of those teams are more talented than the Rangers. Even if you think that they are, it can't be by that much. But whether they're more talented or not, they wanted the games more, and that's what counts at this time of the year. And that's why the Rangers end up with 1 point out of a possible 4 over the weekend. And they were probably lucky to even get that 1 point, if we're being completely honest. But it all comes down to this Blue Jackets lost me the defense that the Rangers played. It was just atrocious. You know, just so many instances where the Jackets just went straight to the net and just did whatever they felt like doing. Case in point, the first goal of the game. You've got the Jackets scoring on a rush to make it 1-0. This was just so easy. You know, you've got a turnover by Will Cooley. The Jackets break out. Werenski goes right around Soucy. Zach Jones is there. He doesn't provide any resistance whatsoever. And then the Blue Jackets are able to score. And literally 3 seconds later, after the next face-off, the Jackets go right in. They almost score again. And Quick was able to keep the puck out. Just a bad sequence there. Then the Rangers eventually tie it. They make it 1-1 with a goal late in the first period. Now, you would think big goal late in the first period, the Rangers are going to hit the ground running, find their legs, take control of this game in the second period, and the exact opposite happens. You've got Fantilli scoring on the rush. K'Andre Miller, this is something that we've talked about with the Ranger defenseman. He's not the only one that's done it. Let me make that clear. But the Ranger defenseman, and I don't know if this comes down to them just being too passive or if you can chalk this up to coaching or some combination of both. These Ranger defensemen give ground and give ground and give ground and give ground when a team is coming over the blue line on a rush. And I realize that in some ways, you have to do that a little bit. If you just try to, make an open ice hit and completely whiff, now you're really in some trouble. But like I've been saying on here, you're in just as much trouble if you just keep back skating and just let these guys go right to your net, which is what happened here with K'Andre Miller. The Raider defensemen give up way too much ground when it comes to defending the rush. The Rangers are terrible at defending the rush in the first place, but that aspect of it, I think it's kind of been under talked about. And granted, this team has a lot of problems, so I can certainly understand why something like this kind of falls between the cracks a little bit, but it's a problem. It's been a problem all season. It was a problem on this goal here. And then you get another Rangers special right after this. You've got the Blue Jackets scoring about 20 seconds later. I think it was exactly 24 seconds later, if I'm remembering correctly, but less than 30 seconds. Fantilli goes in. He scores right away. And again, all this, these two goals here early in the second period that the Rangers concede, this is their follow-up to getting a big-time goal from Artemi Panarin at the end of the first period. The goal that you think is going to get them going. They're going to carry over this momentum into the second period, and it's just nowhere to be found. And then to follow all this up, the two goals that they surrender to Fantilli in 24 seconds, the shift after that, they take a penalty. So phenomenal sequence of hockey here by the New York Rangers. But honestly, all this nonsense is par for the course. Bad penalties, bad starts to periods, bad follow-up to the shift following a goal. I'm trying to not repeat myself too much on here, because I know I talked about this in the Senators game too, but all of this stuff, they really are continuous problems, and they really do absolutely kill this team. They can't straighten out any of these issues that they've had the entire season. And again, are the coaches not hammering at home? Are the players not taking it upon themselves? Are the coaches trying to get them to understand this importance, and they're just not buying into it, or they've just tuned out the coaching staff? I don't know, but this just keeps happening over and over and over again. And it happened again later in this game. When the Rangers eventually tied it, made it 3-3, it stayed 3-3 for about 9, 10, 11 minutes, somewhere in that ballpark. And then the Jackets score 2 goals in a minute and 44 seconds. So it happened again. The 2 quick goals surrendered in succession, one after another. You can set your watch this nonsense. And something else that I've talked about too on here, if we're all aware of this as fans, you have to believe their opponents are aware of this as well, that the Rangers are very susceptible to giving up goals in the shift that follows a goal, or in the fairly immediate aftermath of a shift that follows a goal. And, they've just absolutely crushed this team. And look, if we're going to be subjected to this same nonsense night in and night out, then you better believe I'm going to come on here and vent about it. And feel free to vent about it yourselves. Leave some comments in the YouTube comment section. Send me an email. Do whatever you got to do. But it's just unbelievable. But at the same time, it's not unbelievable because we've been watching them do it all season. This is basically expected. Every time a goal is scored now, you have to hold your breath on the next shift. You have to wonder, man, are these guys going to have their heads in the game? And it's one thing if it happens once in a while. Nobody's perfect, right? It's going to happen to every team over the course of a 82-game season, at least once in a while. But it happens constantly with the Rangers, and there's never any course correction. It never gets any better. And you see the result. They lose this game 7-3, and largely due to the same problems that they've been having all year, they were prevalent in this game as well. But in just a second, we're going to continue talking, obviously, about this disaster of a game here against the Blue Jackets, this devastating loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And we will do that in just a second. I want to get to that sequence that I've been talking about for the first couple of minutes here, the sequence that I think basically defines the 2024-2025 Rangers. And like I said, we will get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Factor. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, You can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. The convenience is absolutely unbeatable. No press, no prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/lockedon NHL50 off and use code LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnNHL50 off at factormeals.com/lockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, let's keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers as always. And I don't know, you guys let me know. The Rangers are back in action Tuesday night, but what do we do for the Tuesday afternoon episode, the Tuesday morning episode? Well, we'll drop it sometime, probably in the early afternoon on Tuesday. Should we do a Peter Laviolette hot seat episode? Do we want to get away from the Rangers and talk about the Wolfpack a little bit? See what's going on there? Should I talk about my time at Disney World? Maybe I should go back to Disney World. You know, the Rangers were doing pretty well when I was at the Magic Kingdom. They were 2-0-1 while I was gone, and they've had 2 devastating, crushing losses since I've come back. So I do apologize for that. But you guys let me know. I'm all ears, up for pretty much an episode on just about any topic in the next one. But for right now, let's go ahead and talk about this sequence that I think defines the 2024-2025 New York Rangers, perhaps better than any sequence that we've seen the entire season. This is the kind of sequence that lets you know what this team is all about. So the one I'm talking about here is the second period. Rangers are down 3-1. They've given away the lead, or they never led, but it was tied, and they give the lead to the Blue Jackets by allowing 2 straight goals scored early in the second period, 24 seconds apart by Fantilli. Now you're getting into, the middle parts of the second period here, and the Rangers, who do not look good up to this point in the game, score 2 shorthanded goals on the same penalty kill. This is the first time that the Rangers have done this since 2014, so it's been more than a decade. But what happens after the Rangers do that? You've got the Garden absolutely rocking. People are into it. People are fired up. We're going to come back. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to get a big win here in a game that we absolutely have to have. How do the Rangers follow up this amazing sequence by getting 2 shorthanded goals on the same penalty kill? They concede 4 consecutive goals to lose the game 7-3. I have to ask you guys a question here because I don't know the answer. I could try to look this up later. Probably nobody knows this off the top of their head. Has this ever happened in NHL history? Have you ever had a situation in a game where a team is down by 2 goals? They score twice shorthanded on the same penalty kill to tie the game and then go on to lose by 4 or more goals. Only the 2024-2025 Rangers could ever pull off such a Herculean feat. There's no way that's ever happened before. There's been a lot of games in this league. But I have a hard time believing. I mean, to begin with, scoring a shorthanded goal in and of itself is something of a rarity. Scoring 2 in the same game is even more so. Scoring 2 goals on the same PK, I mean, that's like a needle in a haystack kind of a deal right there. So to lose the game at all would be pretty surprising if you have a sequence like that. But to lose by 4 or more goals in a game where you do that, I got to believe there's no way that's ever happened before. And like I said, I'll try to find out for sure a little bit later, and you guys can do your own research and get at me if you find an example of that. But my God, that doesn't even seem possible. But again, we are talking about the 2024-2025 Rangers after all. And kind of like a sad part of this whole thing is that, Ranger fans, we can obviously be kind of hot and cold with this team, and we can be negative at times, and I include myself in that for sure. But when you watch these games on TV and you see the way that crowd reacts to these 2 consecutive shorthanded goals, Kreider got the second goal. Him and Mika had a 2-on-0, and they're playing pitch and catch the whole way there. They executed it perfectly. Kreider scores, on the 2-on-0 to tie the game for the Rangers. MSG erupts. They explode. They're fired up. Let's go Rangers chants. The Raiders fans that are in attendance for these games seem to still be invested in these games, still seem to be trying to get the boys going a little bit, still seem to be trying to spur this team on and get them on some kind of a winning streak here and will them into the playoffs. And they're met by garbage performances by what we saw last night. It just keeps happening. There have been devastating losses like this, inexplicable losses like this that we've seen all season, because this game was the Rangers for the taking after you have these two straight shorthanded goals. And it was back and forth. It was competitive for about 9, 10, 11 minutes, like I mentioned earlier. And then the Blue Jackets just take complete control and they dominate the rest of the game. And there's no pushback from the Rangers. And it just sucks because the people in attendance obviously pay big money for this. You guys know, if you've been to Ranger games, you know it ain't cheap. And this is what they're subjected to. They're subjected to performances like this, inexplicable collapses like this. The Rangers were outscored 7-1 at even strength in this game. And I guess maybe I just answered my own question. Maybe that's how it happened. Maybe the fact that the Rangers scored two shorties on the same PK didn't do anything to change the fact that they were being largely dominated at 5v5. That might be, I might have just answered my own question there. But you would think that getting two shorthanded goals would kind of propel you forward and give you some momentum and give you some jump and give you some urgency to oh my God, let's go win this game, man. We're all fired up. We just got these two shorthanded goals. How awesome was that? Let's put the pedal to the metal. And it just doesn't happen. And while we're on the subject of these two straight shorthanded goals here scored by the Rangers, let me ask a perfectly reasonable question, specifically related to the Chris Kreider goal that was scored on the 2-0. Of course, Braden Schneider got the first goal. That cut it to 3-2. And then Kreider scores on the 2-0 with Mika. And the Rangers score, again, two shorties in the span of 42 seconds. But here's what I think is a perfectly logical question, and yet a question that I don't think has any answer. Why does Chris Kreider always look 3 times faster when the Rangers are shorthanded than he does at any other point in the game? Why is it that when the Rangers are shorthanded, all of a sudden Kreider is driven and determined to get to the net, to make things happen, to contribute offensively, to strike? I mean, is being shorthanded, does that just make everything more exciting because you're back on your heels a little bit by the very nature of being shorthanded? Do you get kind of that underdog mentality and let's catch these guys napping? Is hockey just more exciting for Chris Kreider when his team is shorthanded? You never see Kreider, and this wasn't even the best example of it, but Chris Kreider does have 4 shorthanded goals this season and a bunch of other opportunities to score shorthanded as well. And on all of them, or at least most of them, all the goals that he scored shorthanded and all the opportunities he's had to score shorthanded, he looks infinitely faster when the Rangers are shorthanded than he does at any other point. Why can he not move like that when it's 5v5? Is it the back? Does he have to just pick and choose different parts in the game where he skates hard? That's at least possible, but knowing that the streakiness that Kreider has had over the years and the amount of nothing games that he plays, it's hard to believe that. It's hard to chalk it all up to the back injury. And again, he looks like he's shot out of a cannon when they're shorthanded. If he played like that at 5v5, the same way that he does when the Rangers are shorthanded, I don't think too many of us would have that many issues with Chris Kreider this season. First of all, his stats would look a lot better. He'd pass the eye test a lot better. What holds him back? What prevents him from hitting the Jets like this when the Rangers are 5v5, when they're at even strength? There's no explanation for it. If you have one, I'd love to hear it. I mean, I just threw out some ideas, but I don't really believe any of them. Like the idea that, I guess it's possible he's more on his toes when the Rangers are shorthanded, but you're swimming upstream when you're shorthanded and trying to get offense. 5v5, he should be able. When's the last time we saw Kreider at 5v5 go over the opposing team's blue line and really look dangerous on a rush? It just doesn't happen. So it defies all logic, but, again, we are talking about the 2024-2025 Rangers here. There's a lot of questions that we have that just simply cannot be answered. But one other point that I want to talk about here, actually we got 2. While we're talking about this entire sequence, this ridiculous sequence where the Rangers get 2 shorties and then get outscored 4-0 the rest of the way, again, I think this is a perfectly reasonable question. Where is our Adam Fantilli? Fantilli ends up with a hat trick in this game. 20 years old, former number 3 overall pick is Fantilli. Where's our young player that's going to step up big for this team? I know a lot of people are throwing shade at the veterans, and rightfully so, but what happened to the young guys on this team? Alexis Lafreniere, breakout season last year, stepped up big time in the playoffs. A lot of highlight reel goals for Lafreniere in that playoff run. Got off to a phenomenal start this season, signed his contract, and completely disappeared. He's nowhere to be found. He's in year, 5? Fantilli's in year 2? Lafreniere can't hold a candle to Adam Fantilli right now. You think Alexis Lafreniere is going to go out there and have the kind of game that Fantilli just had? It ain't happening, at least not anytime soon. Will Cooley, I think for the most part, Ranger fans are mostly happy with Cooley, or at least not as upset with him as they are most of the other players on this team. But what happened to him? He was scoring goals and getting in everybody's face in the early portions of the season, and all of a sudden, there's not a whole lot there. You just don't notice him that much. And this despite the fact that he's actually moved up in the lineup. He's out there with Mika and JT Miller, who've both played, fairly well recently. So I don't know, man. You see somebody like Adam Fantilli go out there and have the kind of game that he had, obviously scoring the hat trick and putting up a really good sophomore season, starting to produce offensively more, plays a decently physical game, is my understanding. Still kind of getting familiar with Fantilli. Obviously, he's new to the league, but where's our Adam Fantilli? Doesn't exist right now. One other thing that I want to make here before we shift gears and talk about the decision to go with Jonathan Quick over Igor Shesterkin is that, and I include this in the sequence that I'm talking about here. This all ties back to this sequence where the Rangers scored the 2 shorthanded goals, then gave up 2 goals to trail 5-3 going into the third period. We talked about Kreider a minute ago. I can't be the only person that's sick of this either. I'm sick of Chris Kreider at the end of every period, standing near the door as everybody passes by him, goes into the locker room, and just standing there, staring into space. He fist bumps everybody, but he stands there staring into space, not making any eye contact with anybody, not saying anything to anybody. At a time when this team needs leadership, they don't have a captain. He's the longest tenured Ranger by a long shot. And there he is, just staring into space, fist bumping people. It just seems like his mind is in another place. And I don't know, maybe that's nitpicking. Maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh here. But I think when you have a season like this and you see this many important players underperform to the degree that they've underperformed, you tend to get pretty sick and tired of a lot of different things, especially when we're past the 3/4 point of the season. And that just for one reason or another stood out to me at the end of the second period there. He just looks dejected and honestly like he's not even all the way there. Just blank look on his face and fist bumps everybody, but doesn't talk to anybody, doesn't look at anybody. I don't know, man. I don't know. Just tired of it. Just tired of it. Anyway, in just a second, we're going to shift our attention to some of the personnel decisions made by Peter Laviolette going into this game, and specifically the decision to go with Jonathan Quick over Igor Shesterkin. We will get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It is the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works just as hard as you do. The satisfying crack of opening each shell, it is like snack meditation. Get snackin' and get crackin' with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, let's keep everything rolling here. On Locked On New York Rangers, want to conclude today's episode by talking about some of the personnel decisions made by Peter Laviolette. Thought about talking about this after the loss to the Senators, but I figured I'd give it one more day and let's just see what happens and see how it goes here. One of the bigger decisions that he made was to go with Jonathan Quick over Igor Shesterkin. Now, for the most part, that's what the Rangers have done. That's what Gallant used to do. I think most teams tend to do that. When they have a back-to-back, they tend to go with one goalie in one game, the other goalie in the other game. And I feel like it's been more commonplace over the last 5 or 10 years for backup goalies to get more starts than they previously used to. You're not going to see any goalie in the NHL starting 77 games anymore. That's just not going to happen. So I can understand it from that perspective. The bottom line, though, I would have bucked that trend if I was Peter Laviolette and the Rangers, and I would have gone with Igor Shesterkin in this game. And that's not a case of hindsight being 2020. That's how I felt going into this game as well. I'm going to actually start out here by making the case to go with Jonathan Quick, even though I would have preferred Igor. At the end of this, I'm going to explain why I still think Igor would have been the right way to go for this game. Granted, probably neither goalie was going to make up a 4-goal difference, but I think it's just kind of the mindset and a way to attack this game would have been to go with your franchise goalie. But let's go ahead and make the case for Quick here, and then I'll explain why I would have gone with Igor Shesterkin. First of all, what I just said, it's commonplace for the Rangers and basically every team in the NHL to go with each goalie once when you're dealing with a back-to-back. So I can understand that. And on top of that, you've got 9 games in 15 days. And there's no goalie in the NHL right now that's going to play all 9 games when you are dealing with a 9 games and 15 game stretch. So there's that to consider. Something else to consider in favor of Quick, I think, would be the fact that he's coming off of a phenomenal performance against the Nashville Predators. I know it's the Predators. I know that they're probably the only team in the NHL that has failed to meet expectations to as great of a degree as the New York Rangers have. I get that. But bottom line, he was great in that game. And a 34-save shutout is a 34-save shutout, any way you slice it. He made some unbelievable saves in that game, too. That was one of the games that happened during my break, but I saw highlights and saw some of the ridiculous saves that he was making in that game. So there are certain reasons you can throw out there as far as why you would go with Quick over Igor, but I'm still going with Igor for this game. I know Igor played the day before. I know he's coming off a tough loss to the Senators. He was under fire, a lot of high danger opportunities for the Senators in that game, a lot of grade A chances, and obviously he ends up stopping 33 saves or making 33 saves on 37 shots. But I've been saying all along here, and something I'm going to reiterate right here and right now, I truly do believe that whatever small hopes and prayers the Rangers have left this season, and there will be some people that fight me and say like, oh, forget about the playoffs. Look, I'm not going to forget about the playoffs when the Rangers are as close as they are. We got to talk about something on here, and I think most Ranger fans like to be optimistic, and they like to think that we're still in this, we still have a chance, and that's what I'm going to roll with. No team that's 2 points out of a playoff spot with 18 or 19 games to go is hopelessly out of it. They might very well miss the playoffs, but if they do, it's not going to be because they had no chance at this point in the season. So now that I got that out of the way, yeah, I mean, again, the Rangers have a lot of problems, and this is something that I've talked about in the past. I think whatever small hopes and dreams they have this season, it all lives and dies with Igor Shesterkin, because we talked about a lot of the problems that the Rangers have had all season earlier in this episode. Just the lack of attention, the bad penalties, the inability to defend the rush, the fact that they can't get their heads on straight in the shift that follows a goal, the fact that they always get off to bad starts, the fact that they're not clutch this season, the fact that they can't win an overtime game. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. But like I've said, what's the biggest chance that the Rangers have of masking at least some of those problems? To me, it's the franchise goalie. It's Igor Shesterkin. And I realize this has not been Igor Shesterkin's best season, not by a long shot, but he does tend to play his best when the lights are the brightest. And we've seen some evidence of that recently. He got a shutout not too long ago. He played great against the Senators despite allowing 4 goals. To me, if you're going to fight your way into the dance, you're going to be one of the teams that gets into the playoffs, Igor Shesterkin is going to have to shoulder a heck of a lot of the load. And for him to not play in this game, and I know it's the second game of a back-to-back, but consider your opponents here. You're going up against the Senators. You're neck and neck with them for a playoff spot. Then you're going up against the Blue Jackets. You're neck and neck with them for a playoff spot. So I can understand the logic that, okay, Quick is going to have to play some of these games, 9 games in 15 days. I get it. There's going to be better games for Quick to play than this one. And again, I know it's a back-to-back. I don't care. Forget about the back-to-back. You got to get your franchise goalie out there. You got to give your guy that has played very well recently, you got to give him a chance to do what he does, stand on his head, cover up some of the issues that the Rangers obviously have this season, and try to steal some wins down the stretch here and fight your way into the playoffs that way. It's not an ideal, strategy. It's not an ideal way to win a Stanley Cup, but it's the best chance that the Rangers have right now of even making the playoffs. Forget about going on a deep run in the Stanley Cup and any of that nonsense. Let's just try to eke our way in there first. And to me, the best way of doing that is to ride Igor Shesterkin basically until the wheels fall off. You play Quick only when you feel like you absolutely need to, when Igor desperately needs a breather. And that's nothing against Jonathan Quick, but again, this is your only shot. Your only shot is Igor Shesterkin basically going into God mode to even get into the playoffs. So for me, you give him every opportunity to do exactly that. We'll see if the Rangers, adjust going forward. Is Igor going to get, a great percentage of the games moving forward here? We will see. To me, there just would have been better spots you could pick and choose to use Jonathan Quick. They've got some Western Conference teams that they're playing in the near future here. Maybe throw him out there for one of those. But to me, it should have been Igor in this game. It was a must-win game, and in a must-win game, you got to go with your franchise goalie. That's just how I look at it. But that wasn't the only decision. There were obviously a lot of Ranger fans talking about some of the decisions that he made for the Ottawa game, namely keeping Brett Berard out of the lineup. I hate that. Brett Berard has played well. He's basically a buzzsaw out there, and I've talked about this before too. But the Rangers desperately need a shot of energy, need a shot of enthusiasm. And I know they played better during that 3-game stretch when I wasn't here, but Brett Berard needs to be in the lineup for both the short term and the long term. He's a better option than multiple players on this Ranger team right now, and he was, not in the lineup obviously for that game. They go with Parson instead. They flip-flop the two of them in and out of the lineup for this game. And my hope, again, is that Brett Berard plays every game the rest of the way. Same thing for Brandon Othmann. And I'm also getting tired of seeing Brandon Othmann on the fourth line. This is your first-round draft pick, man. This is a guy that you're expecting big things from. The only prospect in the Ranger organization with a higher ceiling than Othmann would seemingly be Gabe Perreault. And he's played almost exclusively on the fourth line. And I know part of the reason for that is that Othmann is predominantly a left winger, and you've got Panarin ahead of him, you've got Cooley ahead of him, you've got Kreider ahead of him. And I know there's going to be some people saying scratch Kreider, move Kreider to the fourth line. Realistically, they're just not going to do that. And we could debate whether they should or not, but they're not going to do that. We all know that. So that's an issue, but you could move Othmann over to the right wing. I mean, you could move him up the lineup that way and move him on the right wing. You could move Kreider or Panarin or, to the right wing, whatever it might be. I don't know. I mean, to me, it's worth a shot. I don't see the point in having Brandon Othmann waste away on the fourth line when he's somebody that can give you a jolt, that needs to be put in a position to succeed. The Rangers make this mistake with their prospects all the time. And I know, those spots have to be earned and everything. What has, Alexis Lafreniere done to maintain his spot in the top six? Can anyone answer that? Do we really need, I mean, I know they're not going to move Kreider to the fourth line, but they probably should. I mean, you could easily put Mika Zibanejad at center and move him down to the third line. And then, that would put Mika and Kreider back on the same line, which I really don't want to do. But for the purposes of moving Brandon Othmann up the lineup, it might actually be worth it. You could put Othmann on the second line then with JT Miller and Will Cooley. I don't know. Do something. Give Othmann a chance, man. So, that's where things stand. And the defense core, it's a complete mess right now. There's been so much overturn, and you got Keandre Miller and Will Borgen. They're your top pairing. Vakanainen and Schneider, I thought, were terrible in this game against the Blue Jackets. And then you've got Susie and Jones out there. None of the Ranger defensemen played well. Stop me if that sounds familiar. But that's kind of where things are. The only thing that I liked from the Ranger defensemen in this game was the fact that Will Borgen did defend Vincent Trocheck and drop the gloves at the end of this game. That was the coolest thing that happened in this game for the Rangers, but that's pretty much it. So we'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.